Welcome to the Radicards podcast on Radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Greeno, and today I have Brian Hayes joining me again for this episode. It's the same old routine as before. 3 questions, 5 minutes each. So let's just dive right into it here. Question number 1, when does it make sense not to care about condition flaws on trading cards? So, the whole thing with me on this is that the rarer the card, the less I care about condition flaws. So if I never see a card, it's just I come across a listing every 5-10 years, and I see one that's got a dinged corner, I'll take it. It's got a refractor line, I'll take it. It's got a ding, like an edge, like imperfect edge. There's some chipping. If it's like a platinum medallion or something, I'll take it. There's really not a lot that I'll say no to. If it's got a fold in the middle of it, that would be heartbreaking. But luckily, I don't see too much of that stuff. I'm very flexible. If it's a low grade, it comes out like a PSA 6, I'll take it. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, it's a 6. I'm like, yeah, but it's the only one. Why don't you just wait around then for another copy? It's a 1 of 1. That's the whole argument, right? That 1 of 1s that come to you and slabbed, BGS 5 or PSA 6, and then people complain about the condition. I'm like, but it's the only one. It's the only one. There's no waiting around for a better copy of this card. So, Brian, talk to me about your thoughts on this, and when there have been situations when you've looked at a card like, gosh, I don't even care that it's, this low grade or it has a condition flaw. And what's on your mind?
Yeah, sure, Patrick. So first of all, I totally agree with you that, generally speaking, the rarer a card is, the less I care about condition flaws. I think that makes a lot of sense to most collectors out there. If a card is rare and hard to come by, you sort of act and obtain that card when you can, because you just never know when you're going to see that card again. So definitely agree with you there. And then sort of coming at this from a different angle, probably if there's a card that I really like and, I know it's for me and it's for my PC and it's going to be with me for a long time, I tend to care maybe a little bit less about the condition flaws because, once again, I'm collecting for myself. And if I'm happy, as long as the card has an overall good, appearance, it has a nice presence, usually, nice and centered, but, I'll definitely, accept some condition flaws in those scenarios. But if I have a card that I think I want to turn around and sell someday, then I tend to look at the condition a little bit more carefully because I just know that a lot of collectors are, they're very strict on what cards they will accept into their collection. And when I'm selling a card, I want to just make sure that I have as wide a collector base as possible to sell the card to. So if I'm sort of thinking down the road a little bit, I'll probably pay a little bit more attention to the conditions of the card. Like obviously with my own PC, I have my own standards. And because I tend to collect rare cards, just sort of going back to the first point now, I've got a lot of cards that are rare, but not, in mint condition or close to mint condition, but they still have a nice appearance. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of great black bordered 1 of 1 Bowman parallels from the last 10 years that have graded out well below 10s. And honestly, 7, I'm happy with a 7.6. I'll take it, cause it's just, I can scan that card in and make it look amazing, and it doesn't have to be a perfect example of the card. There are a lot of cards like that. I picked up a 2000 finest gold refractor Johan Santana. It's a BGS 8, but it looks like a 9, 10. It looks really great. It just has great presentation value to it, so I can live with it. And you save a few bucks too, because a 9.5 sells for like $300, an 8 sells for like $100, so you save a few bucks for these minor condition differences. Oftentimes you don't even really notice the change, right? It's such a trivial flaw that it doesn't really matter. But again, I'm just happy to find the card. If this is the only example I ever find, obviously if the print run's quite a bit larger, let's say it's to 55 or 60, let's just say, and there's a slight condition flaw on it. Let's say there's a refractor line. I can live with it because the card is so uncommon. I never see this card. I'm willing to work to get that card, even though it's not exactly perfect. But if it's, it looks like a 7 or an 8, that's good enough for me. And honestly, if it were a 5 or a 6, I'd probably be fine with it too. It's just that I think that there are certain times when it's okay to be lenient on conditions and not worry about trivialities like that. So I want to touch on that one.
Yeah, and just one other quick thought on this.
Sure.
I often find, I'm sure a lot of us have as well, for a lot of cards that are so-called, a PSA 10. I mean, they are a PSA 10. If you actually look at them closely, you can see they have just as many obvious flaws as like many PSA 9s. And so sometimes I sort of consider, like, when a third-party grading company grades the card, I sort of use that as a starting point as to whether or not I want to add that card to my collection. But then when you start looking at the details yourself, you can see, like, PSA 10s, PSA 9s, like the cards themselves, they appear to have like the same flaws. And so in those kind of cases, I'll usually just go down to the PSA like 9 if it presents really well, and save that money. And then usually, I'll have extra money to go after other cards, and I sort of build my collection that way.
I like that. It's a good close to that one. All right, so point 2. Now, recently, a 1993 finest base card of Mike Piazza sold in a graded case that indicated it as a refractor. And it was being sold as a refractor. Now, I don't know if the seller knew or didn't know, or if one of the assistants of that seller listed as a refractor, they didn't know one way or another. There's no way for me to point fingers here. It's not fair. All I know is that it was listed as a refractor, and it collected hundreds of dollars. Now, I've always been the type that's been like buyer beware, caveat emptor, learn as much as you can about what you buy. The only person who's at fault on the purchasing is you if you buy something that's erroneous in some way, or inauthentic or illegitimate. It's just up to the buyer. If it's intentional, obviously, to misrepresent something on the seller, that's the seller's problem. But to fend against misrepresentation, you learn as much about what you're going to buy as possible so you can make the best purchasing decision. When you find stuff like this, Brian, when you come across it, are you ever prompted to share this information with the community? Be like, hey, by the way, this is a base card, or hey, by the way, this isn't this parallel, or hey, this isn't just the platinum. This is something more important than the platinum. When are you prompted? Is it card significance that prompts it, or something you collect, or maybe something you don't collect because you're not going to pull in the competitors? Tell me what's on your mind.
Yeah. So for me, like, if I happen to see something like that, maybe online, like I'm browsing through an auction house or eBay, or maybe I see something on Instagram, that's not my card, I'll probably like mentally note it, say, that's interesting. Something here looks like it got mislabeled. But probably not. I mean, quite frankly, or quite honestly, I'm probably not going to just like go out of my way to sort of reach out to others and say, this something fishy or is going on with this card, or the label doesn't align with the card. But if it's my card, like, and I purchased it and I am showcasing it online, or I am selling it, then I'm definitely going to be as explicit as I can, and explain what we're looking at and why the label doesn't match with the card, and where the mistake would be. And if it's a significant enough card, then I would probably, if it's mine, at some point I would get it reholdered. I would send it back to the grading company, PSA, BGS, whatever, wherever I decide, and to get it fixed and straightened out, just so there's less room for misunderstanding going forward.
I think it's fair. I mean, truly, I think it's not my responsibility to tell the market, hey, this is or isn't this what's stated. But sometimes, every now and then, I run across someone like, somebody's going to be out a lot of money, and that's upsetting. So, for example, some months ago, I caught on eBay an auction for the 1990 Upper Deck Reggie Jackson auto, but I realized it was just a base card that somebody had added in his autograph and the serial number.
Okay.
The difference, the way you can tell that is that the shape of the hologram on the card's reverse will indicate if it's the pack issued autograph or not. A circle hologram will indicate the pack issued base card without the autograph on it. A diamond shaped hologram will indicate that it's pack issued autographed. This one had the circle hologram, which indicated it was at one point just a standard base card. But it had an autograph and a serial number on the front. So I just let people know. I was like, hey, by the way, this isn't the pack issued example. Just a heads up. I didn't say it was fake. I didn't mention any of those words. I just said, if you're bidding on this, just be aware that this is the pack issued card. This may have been in person signed. It may not have, but I can guarantee you that serial number was added later after market.
That's actually a really good topic to bring up. So if you're talking about like autographs, or maybe like even like trimmed cards, like if I saw something maybe under those situations, like where I'm browsing and I can see something that has been trimmed, like somehow, like maybe I don't know. I've had that card before, and I see like I've sold it, and then like I see it online, and it looks different. Like if I somehow know that it's trimmed, I have evidence of it, or I know that a autograph is fake.
Mm-hmm.
I think under those circumstances, even if it's not my card, that would probably prompt me to send out a message somewhere to the hobby community. Instagram probably is where I would start. And I think under that situation, it's a little bit different. I feel like that people have definitely had like nefarious intentions in mind when they do stuff like that. Sometimes with a label that's wrong, like by PSA, it might just be an honest mistake. I don't think they're out there to try to trick anyone or fool anyone. They're just an impartial grading service. That's sort of why I feel like not necessarily like the responsibility to go out to the community and say, this is what's going on, unless once again, it's my card. But definitely some of this other stuff, I do feel like that sort of crosses the line. And if I see that, trying to help the community out here, we're all supposed to be looking out for each other. Definitely in those situations, I would reach out. Now that said, I've never actually been in that situation. Like I've sort of focused in on my collection a lot of times and what I'm doing. And so I've never sort of been in that position, but I feel like that's what I would do.
Yeah, and you have to be careful about slander. You don't want to bring company names into it when you don't have all the facts. You don't know what's what. So I keep all that out of it. I never point fingers. I never say they did this, they did. I don't do any of that. I just say, hey, by the way, this isn't this.
Right.
You take from it what you will, right? Like do talk amongst yourselves at that point. So anyway, I just want to touch on that because I see a lot of, not a lot. I mean, the percentage is pretty small overall, but every now and then I'll come across, I'm like, hey, that's like someone will come in, hey, it did, is this a legitimate Frank Thomas out of it? I was like, well, somebody signed that card. It wasn't Frank Thomas. Like I see that stuff. But I'm not pointing fingers at any one person. I'm not pointing fingers at the seller or anything. I just, I'm looking at the object for what it is, what the actual item, the collectible, so to speak, and talking about that and nothing else. So I want to touch on that just flat out. Final point here, in a previous podcast, we discussed an Albert Pujols 2002 Topps Chrome Black Refractor that apparently sold for $24,600. And then, immediately thereafter, very predictably, another one was listed by another seller, and they wanted $24,500 opening bid. So you save $100 by bidding on this other copy. Mind you, you can get the 2001 Bowman Chrome Auto for less than this dollar figure, right? 2002 was Albert Pujols' sophomore year, his all-star rookie year. So the question became during that last podcast, will we see any bids on this second example? And sure enough, no bids. None. And so I'm not surprised by that. In fact, I don't even know if the first auction was legitimate. There's no way for me to identify that at all. And I'm not going to spend any time investigating because, quite frankly, I don't care. It created an imperfect perception of market value. And so with this second auction that came around, I didn't anticipate any action. So I wasn't surprised we saw no bids. Like I said, realistically at auction, I think sub 2,000, sub 2 is where I'm looking. Like realistically, somewhere between 12 and 15 is really where I'm feeling it. Maybe a little more, give or take. So when I see something that's just so backwards to me, I have to talk about it. Now, Brian, tell me, did you expect to see any bids on the second listing?
I did not. Like the first closing number was so high that it just didn't seem likely that the second one wouldn't. So I wasn't surprised at all. But I will say this: I don't have any problem with the owner of the second card putting their card out there and seeing what would happen. There's no harm. There's no harm in trying. Like they might be just like us saying, hey, another copy of this card sold for some really crazy amount. I've got this card, and I might be able to turn this into a really nice gain. And so they're just trying and said, hey, I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, then I still have a really great card. The card itself is gorgeous.
It is. It really is.
It's such a great card, and so maybe that's sort of what their mindset was. Like, hey, it doesn't hurt to try, and let's see if there's somebody else out there. And so it sort of comes back to what you were saying before about like sort of buyer beware. If someone had come to the second card and bid on it for that really high amount, then, they just sort of, we're taking this one piece of information, how this first copy sold for a high amount, and said, hey, the card must be worth this much. This is how much it's going to cost to bring the card home. But that didn't happen. And so I think this is an example of how all markets kind of work. Is like there's a price sold, and people have that information, and they make their decisions off of that. And over time, the market sort of finds that value of what the card is. And it seems like in this case we have a one-off sale, and it didn't lead to another high price.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing too, is that the market dictates values. So when the spike happened, last March of 2020 with cards, and Frank Thomas 1990 Leaf rookies and PSA 10 went from selling for $60 and $70 to $450 plus, I was like floored. And then the question was, why? Almost everyone that gets slabbed is a 9 or a 10. Card's in great shape out of packs. Just centering issues plagued that set. And one gentleman said, his answer was too cheap for too long. I was like, that's impossible. The market dictates the value. It's not too cheap for too long. It was the market's value for as long as it was. Now the market's willing to pay more because, circumstances have changed. And so, but circumstances are also not permanent. They're temporary. So once the market corrects, we'll see a new high, but I don't think we're going to see this like $700 sale prices for a car that consistently brings in high grades when slabbed. I just thought that was an imperfect answer to this question. Like, what's the cause from going to $70 to $450 to $500 for this same card? Not a rare card. This particular Pujols card, a little different scenario. We've got a lower print run, rarer, second-year Pujols, all-star rookie. I mean, there's a lot going for it. He's not yet in the Hall of Fame, but he's poised to be there on first pass. So it's got a lot going for him. Do I think it's $25,000? No. Do I think it at some point might be $25,000? Maybe. In like 50 years when this stuff is impossible to find, and this stuff is classic vintage category. And so, I mean, I just don't think we're there yet. That's all I'm saying. So I want to touch on that. This is cool. We get to touch about the second Albert Pujols Black Refractor, kind of a follow-up. So thank you for joining me, Brian Hayes, for this. Do you have any final thoughts?
Nope. I think we covered it. Once again, just a real interesting conversation tonight. Glad I could be here.
Awesome. Thank you for tuning into the Radicards podcast and Radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Reno, and until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.